Welcome everyone once again to the Long Overdue, a show about libraries where each episode I will bring in a special guest where we'll talk about the Sul Ross Library and beyond. Welcome to season 2 of the show. So with me today I have Anthony Quintana, a good friend of mine. He's a second year MA English student and longtime resident of the West Texas area. As a recent graduate of SR in May 2021 with a BA in English, Anthony has served in multiple roles, including as a reporter for the Skyline Newspaper and a peer tutor for the Academic Support Center. He currently serves as a graduate assistant/tutor for the Department of Languages and Literature and also worked as editorial designer for the 2022 edition of the Sage Journal. His favorite genres of literature include nonfiction and poetry. His most recent poem, Ode to the High Fade Comb-Over, is slated for publication in the 2022 edition of the Sage. Welcome, Anthony. Great to have you on the show, man.
Thank you, Edwin. I appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here. First time I've ever been invited over to a podcast, so I'm a little excited, but also nervous. So,
man, not to be nervous about, man. It's just going to be normal conversation between you and I. I'm going to ask you some questions, and we'll just get the ball rolling from there. And also a shout out to Anthony, because today is his birthday. Happy birthday, man.
Ooh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
How old are you turning, man?
28 years young. Wow.
28 years young. Yeah, that's the best way to say it. So, Anthony, with the little shout out of the way, let's go ahead and get the ball rolling. So, what do libraries mean to you, Anthony?
You know, I've been listening to all the past episodes before, and everybody's had a really unique answer, so hopefully mine will be as unique too. So for me, growing up, libraries were an integral part of not only getting interested in literature, but also utilizing the technology. So I'm from Marfa, Texas, born and raised over there, and we have the public library there, and they were always having events going on for kids and different community outreach programs. So whenever I wasn't a part of those, I would just go in my free time with my older siblings. I have 2 older sisters. So that was our way of using computers, connecting online. So this would have been early 2000s, back in the days of Yahoo Messenger and those type of chatting things before social media like we have now. Yeah. So that's what my teenage sisters would use. I would use it for video games.
Of course.
So yeah, you'll appreciate that. I would play Star Wars and other pilot games. Dude. So some of the early computer games with 3D graphics. But yeah, it was a place for me to read. So I was reading a lot of graphic novels, a lot of Goosebumps, R.L. Stein. That was kind of what I was interested in. Yeah. And different things like that. So some of it was a little bit advanced for my age. So early 2000s, that would have been when I was around 6 to 9 years old, when I was mostly spending my time there. And then as an adult, you know, coming to Sul Ross in 2016, that was my go-to place for studying, for utilizing the services as well. And then also, you know, that's how I met a lot of our mutual friends. A lot of us got connected through the library. And then as I continued on in my academic career, in 2019, that's when I started as a tutor for what used to be called the Tutoring and Learning Center. Yeah. Now it's the Academic Support Center. I still call it the TLC. It's the TLC in my heart.
Everybody still calls it the TLC, man.
Yeah. So for me, you know, just it was a natural progression for me to go from studying to going as a tutor and just connecting with everybody. So libraries to me is a place for connecting with others, but also finding new opportunities to explore one's curiosity, both academically and creatively.
That's good, man. Like you said, very, very unique response to the unique response we've gotten over time. And honestly, it's great to hear that the library has already been such a great and huge part in your life already, especially like living in places like here in Alpine and Marfa, where like there's not exactly a lot to do.
Exactly.
So it's always great to know that the libraries are so supported by the community that you can find things to do just by going there, whether it be reading your favorite books or, like you said, going to some of the events that were provided to the library by the community or by the library itself.
Yeah, and that was the great thing. You know, it was the central hub for everything. So a lot of our generation, the millennial generation, before smartphones and tablets, that was the hangout spot. You know, the library, there wasn't very many things to do in Marfa, so the library was a central place where they would have events during the holidays or just any reason to get kids out and active and participating. So it was a fun time, and I definitely have some great fun memories there.
Oh, well, that's good. And do you think if like the library didn't have those events for the community, do you think you would have still been drawn to it as you were growing up?
I don't think as much, but I think I would have still gone naturally because being the youngest out of two siblings, wherever my older sisters went, I would go too. So some stuff, is just, I don't really want to do that, but I was still part of it. So in a way, though, I'm glad, though, because it got me out of my comfort zone. I was a lot more shy and introverted as a young kid. And a lot of my early elementary school teachers would have said the same thing. They're like, wow, we never hear from him. Like, does he talk? Like, what does his voice sound like? So
no, and I think that's a great point to bring up. It's interesting how the library and the library environment themselves are very, like, you'd think they're very introverted, but they end up somehow bringing out a little bit of your extrovert, because you'll see someone reading a specific book and you're curious more about the book than the person, but it ends up opening up those doors of conversation, and you're like, oh, look, we actually like the same thing, or, oh, look, a new perspective. So I think that's interesting that it did that for you as well.
Yeah, I definitely had that experience too here at Sul Ross in the library. One of the things I always appreciated too is the view of Alpine, especially from the first and third floor. Absolutely beautiful, and that was one of the things that was advertised to me as I was registering for classes.
Me too, actually. The views, the sights, and everything.
Absolutely, yeah.
I just wish I could take down the McDonald's sign, but that's a thing for later. So
Corporate America.
Corporate America, exactly. So with this in mind, what does our library mean to you now that you've been to the Sul Ross Library in your time here?
I've been actually reflecting on that over the past few years, especially, again, getting my start as a tutor over there, but then also just as a regular student studying, looking up different books in different genres, either for classes or just for fun. I've kind of noticed a transition in myself where I used to just go for more functional way, I guess, for lack of better words. In other words, just to go there for a specific reason with intentionality. Now I just go for fun. I love exploring and looking at different books, the comic book collection that we have there. So the Sul Ross Library for me really is a special place because, again, that's where I got to connect with so many people that I consider lifelong friends and wonderful coworkers and people in our circle. So just really being able to connect with people and everything else, I really do owe a lot to the library and just the people that are there. I think it brings out the best in the community here, and it also, like as you mentioned, it sparks curiosity. So even if somebody isn't really connecting with somebody else or talking, so to speak, it's one of those things where they might have a book and they go, oh, what is that right there? Or what is it that you're doing? So it was a way for me to connect with more students and really explore what the library does have to offer beyond the technology resources and the books that they do have. So,
yeah, and I think it's great that the TLC was a part of the library back in the day, because I think about like the rest of campus, and I can't think of another spot where you would want to put the TLC, because putting this tutoring center right smack dab in the middle of the library was not only helpful to the students, but also helpful to you as tutors, because you could be like, oh, you can go to the third floor, look at some books there, and we can start talking about using them as examples for some of your papers and whatnot. So, like, yeah, I definitely agree with what our library means to you, and definitely how it has helped shape your experiences as a tutor.
Yeah, it's been very humbling too, because not only has it shaped me personally and professionally, but I've also seen the transition with other students. Working at the TLC formally, we would get a lot of first-year students, and a lot of them, it was their first semester or their first year as a college student, so there was a big adjustment there when it came to time management and the course workload and things like that. So really just letting them know that we're there, and we're not there to criticize them or judge their work harshly. We're just there to be a helping hand, and really a lot of the work that they're doing is us just helping them get to where they need to go. So seeing that transition from a very shy student to someone that's more confident, and it's on a first name basis because we're a small campus, so we get to build those interpersonal relationships with students and professionally. It was a very humbling experience, because not only did it influence me as an individual, but I could see it amongst some of our first year students as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, some of these students, like you said, are very shy, very, very introverted, and they end up getting the help to overcome that through some of the most unlikely sources, one of these being the tutoring center, because obviously, like, I'm just here to get my homework done, but they end up coming out of their shell a little bit more, maybe not a lot, but a little bit more, and that ends up being like very useful for them, like how it was useful for you in developing as a person.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Yeah, because it wasn't just a overnight transition for me. Again, coming from a very shy background, I'm very fortunate that in our graduate program and even in the undergraduate program with languages and literature, there was a lot of faculty that would see the potential in all of us. And especially with my situation, they said, why don't you consider, this tutoring thing, or why don't you consider participating with this group and this and that? And for me, it was breaking out of my comfort zone, because initially when I came to Sul Ross, I thought, I'm just going to quietly make my way through my degree plan, just sneakily go through, and then 4 years will go by and have my bachelor's. I'm glad that plan didn't work out.
Yeah.
I'm glad others saw potential in me and really pushed me forward. So, I really tried to do that for some of the students coming through, regardless of what their background was. And, it was very interesting because I saw a lot of parallels with them as well. Because coming from first year and then transitioning all the way to senior, you see that level of progression over time, especially as the students try to push forward in their academic careers. So I could see former versions of myself, so to speak, through those students. So I kind of knew how to talk to them in a specific way, or how to address our tutorial sessions. So even though sometimes they might have come for writing help, we ended up talking about other academic resources available for them. And some of them, they were just having a rough day, and they would ask, they just needed somebody to talk to, somebody to reaffirm that they are a good student, they are important. So yeah, in a way, being a tutor is also just carrying on a bunch of other responsibilities, even though we inadvertently not necessarily are signed up for that, but it's kind of a natural progression. So it's been wonderful.
That's great. I'm definitely glad to hear that. I'm definitely glad to hear that our library was able to provide you with that space and experience. So with this in mind, and you've answered this a little bit already, what's your history with libraries while you were growing up to where you are today?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we touched on it in the intro, but I'll try to expand a little bit more. So yeah, central hub for hanging out in a small town area, opportunity to use computers and the internet at an early stage in time where I didn't have access to those things at home, so it was either at school or at the library. So just relaxing, using it as a place to hang out, explore my curiosity with literature, graphic novels, comic books, so on and so forth. And then it's kind of interesting because in elementary school, I was very invested in reading and learning. But then as high school and junior high come around, as a teenager, you kind of explore other options. You're figuring out your self-identity. So I used to think, I don't like reading books. Books are boring. And it wasn't until college that fire got reinvigorated in me once again. And I said, wow, there's so many great things here. And that curiosity came back. So I think that's what the power of the library has, and the people that work there is the people working with you and having that first impression when you reach out. Especially with a big library like Sul Ross's, it's not as massive as other campuses, so to speak, but it's that we have an awesome collection of different resources. So it can be a little intimidating if you've never gone through there before, but talking with the librarians or the circulation desk staff, everybody is super helpful, very friendly, and I think that makes a difference how someone perceives a library.
No, most definitely, you're absolutely right. Like, yes, a library is already a very welcoming place, but you also have to have a welcoming staff. Like, if your librarians end up being like cranky and mean, like the old stereotypical librarians, or if you're at the circulation desk that just never pay attention to you, like, obviously it's going to ruin your experience with the library. But we are lucky enough to not have that. I'm lucky enough to be working alongside librarians and circulation desk workers that provide that experience and welcoming aura, so to speak, to the students who walk in. And it's just, again, I definitely agree with what you said. It's great that your history with the library has been like this, and it's been a very positive one for you, and it's helped you be who you are today. So now with this in mind, with the libraries have meant to you and your history with them, to delve further into your history, what's the coolest library you visited?
So I think the coolest library I've ever visited, it was in San Antonio. It's called the San Pedro Library. Okay. And I don't remember the exact location. I want to say it's on the north side of San Antonio. Okay. But it's very neat in the sense that the aesthetic of the building itself, it's very traditional building ware. So it's not Adobe. I don't necessarily know the material it's made out of. But it's really unique in the sense that it evokes history and Texas history. And as you go in there, there's a wide collection of different books in there, from Texas history to just American history in general. And they have a lot of classics. They have an archive there. And it was really neat. I managed to visit that about 2 years ago. Nice. Or I'm sorry, 3 years ago before the pandemic. And yeah, it was really fun. We just happened to go by there, and we were looking at different things to do, me and my family, when we were traveling, because that's where my siblings live, is in San Antonio. So we were looking at different things to do, and that library came up, and I was researching it, and I said, I want to stop there. And my oldest sister, her name is Sam, she said, yeah, let's go, because she loves reading too, so she has a passion for that. And we stopped there, and it was really unique. Plenty of books, not as massive in scale as the Sul Ross Library, but it's a little unique space, out of nowhere that, if you're not actively looking for it, you might not know it exists, but it's a fun place to go to. And from the research I found, a lot of people use it as a resource for history regarding Texas and also American history.
So then this library is mainly like a Texas history library then, right?
Yeah, you could classify it as that.
Oh, okay. So in your in your little discovery there, were you able to find any books specifically that caught your attention while going through there?
Well, surprisingly, when we went, we actually found books about the Big Bend area. So
okay.
I had seen those books before, especially if you go to Marfa or anywhere else, there's generally books about the area. So some of them are historical fiction, and then others are based off of urban legends and tales. Some of them is just straight history about the area of Big Bend and just the West Texas area around here in general. So to see them there, it was just a fun little nod to me that, a massive place as San Antonio would consider a small community like Marfa or Fort Davis. So that was fun to see that there.
Yeah, it's always great to see, you grow up thinking man, this place is so small, nobody cares about it. But then you go to libraries in different parts of Texas specifically, and you're like, oh, look, they actually read up on our history, on our geography here. And I think that's another great bit about the library. The library makes sure that you or anybody or even areas you've known aren't exactly forgotten. They're always there for you to look at and be like, oh yeah, look, that's right. That's something I used to look at, stuff like that.
Yeah, and coming from a small town community, you don't really realize the sense of scale of just how big a state like Texas is until you start traveling to all these little small towns and places, all these little roadside stops. And my oldest sister Sam, she always says one of my bucket list goals is to stop at all these roadside places and just read the plaques, because we're always constantly traveling. Something you don't really think about unless you're traveling on vacation or something in an RV. But for us, that's something we don't do. So it's just one of those things where, yeah, Texas is so massive and there's so many unique places and a lot of historical influence on other things. So yeah, you just don't realize the scale of everything until you travel around, and you're just like, wow,
Honestly, I feel like if you put this in games like Final Fantasy or something, the map of Texas would just have a bunch of points of interest because of how much there is to the state of Texas.
Yeah, definitely.
So with all of this in mind, if you could build your own library, what would this dream library look like?
I love old Victorian Gothic. I don't know what it is about me. Maybe it's my inner goth coming out, but my teenage goth.
You already got the suit going on.
Yeah, all black on black. But yeah, I've always loved Victorian Gothic architecture just for the unique aesthetic that it carries. So I would like to have something traditional like that. So it has that old aesthetic to it with the furniture and some of the interior design, but with a modern twist. So utilizing things like audiobooks, ebooks, and kind of that preservation there, but also just have some more interactivity. I think it's really interesting what's happening with tech right now, specifically when it comes to archiving media, where we are starting to see more augmented reality things. So for our listeners, that's essentially, it's not virtual reality where you put on a helmet and it's taking you to another world, but it's more so it's integrated with what you're seeing. So I know a lot of museums and other interactive places are utilizing these things to really immerse participants into the material. So I would like to do something like that. So have those modern technologies put to good use. So for example, if there's a historical book, let's say Beowulf, have it to where the person can download an app and then just see the story interact in real time. So maybe there's the epic battle moment with the monster, or so on and so forth. So it's just another way to reinvigorate people's passion for literature in unique and interesting ways, with maintaining the history of the actual physical copy of the book.
Yeah, and I that's why that'd be a great library to visit, and I think that'd be fantastic because it's not easy for a lot of people to open up a book and start reading into it or get deeply invested into it. So I think adding that visual aid that you can also follow along as you're reading would definitely help people, because I mean, humans are curious. We're like, oh man, what's going to happen next? I want to see it, you know?
Yeah.
So,
especially making it accessible to all demographics. So really getting representation for all groups. And just in general, you know, there's a focus now in the technology space where there's this key word that they use called accessibility features. And essentially what that means is making sure that your product is accessible for as many people as possible. So if somebody has a learning disability, a physical disability, such as color blindness or deafness, they can still enjoy and see what it is that the library has to offer. So utilizing those technologies just makes it more equitable for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Like people who have a hard time reading up close, like you said, people with color blindness, people with dyslexia, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think adding a lot of those aids that you would add to Visual Library is absolutely perfect, and it would just maximize that image that we have of a library where it's there to help people. That's its main focus, to be able to be helpful, friendly, and welcoming.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is definitely a great way to build a library. So now we're going to move on to one of the hardest questions, Anthony. I hope you're ready for this one.
Ooh, I'm ready.
What's your favorite book?
Oh, that is a hard question. Oh, man.
That one always gets people.
That's like asking, you know, I don't have kids, but that I would imagine that's like asking who's your favorite child. Yeah. Gosh.
Would you like the easy question instead?
Well, I don't know. Easy with you, I don't know. I don't know how easy that is.
Well, what are you reading right now?
Okay, I'm reading right now. So it's a little cheesy and cliche. I'm reading a kind of not a self-motivational book. I guess you could classify it in that genre. I'm interested in minimalism and the idea of the minimalist lifestyle. So not the art movement, but more so the idea of intentionality and focus in one's life, getting rid of clutter and making more room for more meaningful things. So there's this group that I've been following for a couple of years now. They're called the Minimalists, and they really pioneered this movement that you see online now. And they have a book called Love People, Use Things. And essentially where that term comes from is they used to say that on their podcast and also on their blog when they first started a couple of years ago. And it was just, it caught on, and a lot of people started quoting it all the time, so they decided to turn that into a book. But it just focuses on, there's some anecdotal stories about their experiences, how they kind of started in corporate America and just became unhappy even though they were making six-figure salaries.
Wow.
So they were buying, you know, all the nice furniture, they had the brand new cars and everything, but they weren't happy. So it wasn't until both of them experienced trauma in their life that they realized, okay, you know, maybe the answer isn't necessarily more financial wealth or climbing up the corporate ladder. Maybe I need to find meaning in other places. So it just resonates with me, especially as I get older and just kind of evaluating, you know, what it is that I find value in my life with. And for me, that's community involvement. That's being intentional with my time and building meaningful relationships with people, financial stability, things like that. So it's an interesting book because it's a message they've been spreading for the past couple of years, but it's with a new twist. And then we also get to learn more about their background and just how much of it resonates with me as an individual, and how much it connects with people. So yeah, their quote is, love people, use things, because the opposite doesn't work.
Oh, wow, that's actually a really good quote.
Yeah,
wow.
So it caught on, and it's something that I quote too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's definitely very interesting. I personally wouldn't be able to deal with that lifestyle, but I'm glad it's a lifestyle that works for you and so many other people for this to garner such a large movement in and of its own. But yeah, see, I told you it was a little bit of an easier question now, isn't it?
you know, you weren't lying. You know, at first I was skeptical, but yeah, that was a lot easier.
So So you said that you've gone to a library sometimes just for fun to look around and whatnot. Have you found any notable books or whatnot in our collection that have caught your attention the most?
Well, I really admire the comic book collection because I wasn't too much into comics as a younger child and even as a teenager. I did like graphic novels, and I know there's a distinction there. But I'm trying to explore different options and things because, as you mentioned, my favorite genres are poetry and nonfiction.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to break out of that a little bit more and explore more fiction. I know a lot of people in our cohort with our master's program are really heavily into fiction of different kinds, from young adult to horror to sci-fi, fantasy, so on and so forth. So I'm really trying to get into different things and just have an opportunity there to see what kind of influences me with my own personal academic writing, but also creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been looking at the comic book collection. Of course, I still love poetry, so I'm looking at some of the contemporary poets that we have and just things like that. So nothing in particular that stands out for me. I kind of just grab whatever I see and then see what sticks with me. So yeah, I'm just looking at those things right now, and hopefully I'll have a more definitive answer.
No, I mean, you're not wrong there. I think our comic book collection is one that's been quoted a lot in the previous episodes that I've done. It definitely is something that you kind of don't expect because it's a university library.
Mm-hmm.
You think of a university library and you're like, oh, it's going to be nothing but research books, like journals, heavy literature, Victorian, and so on and so forth. And then it's like, oh no, we have a comic book collection, and people are like, what? But this is a university library. And it's like, well, no, we make sure that our collection offers at least bits and pieces for everyone of all different parts of the world, so to speak. So I'm definitely glad that the comic book collection is something that called to you, especially since you're trying to break out of your shell from just going to fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And even then, you still managed to go to the poetry section.
Yeah, it's a natural thing for me to do, and it's interesting because I didn't get into poetry until I came here to Sul Ross. Again, I went through a long period of time where I wasn't interested in reading at all. So coming to Sul Ross, and especially after taking my prerequisite courses, taking an American literature class for the first time and really digging deeply into the material and analyzing different things like politics and sociology and just all of these important things, analyzing race, gender, and things, thinking more philosophically about how literature connects with the world around us. That was something that I had never been exposed to prior. We got a little bit into that in my high school career, but the main focus was usually on standardized testing. So it was a lot of memorization and just things of that nature. So I kind of had a negative viewpoint on what education was. But as soon as I took that first American literature class, I was completely blown away, and I was like, wow, I thought poetry was this really esoteric thing, where you got to be hip and cool. If you get it, you get it. If not, you're not cool, So, that was my viewpoint. And then as we broke it down and we used like a methodical approach to it, I started going, wow, there's so much depth in here.
Yeah.
It's so artistic and flavorful with the language that they're using, like this is English, but this is like fancy English, I couldn't, that was how I would describe it, I didn't have the vernacular that I do now to articulate myself, so I said, I speak English, this is fancy English. That's how I described it. So
that's honestly how I felt every time we would read a lot of the stories in American lit and British lit. I'd be like, whoa, this is a whole level of English that I didn't think I would ever look at.
It's sophisticated, but it's not unreachable or unattainable. They use a lot of expensive words, but it's not just purely high level writing. It's approachable.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's why I naturally gravitate towards poetry now. It's just the more I dig into it, the more I realize I have so much to learn. But I also appreciate it as a genre and also as an art form. Like one of the things I've been looking into more is spoken word poetry and just seeing how different everything reads when somebody performs as opposed to just reading it. So it's really interesting, and that's just natural for me to go to the poetry section now.
And I think it's great that this university was able to do that for you, because you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, English and a lot of courses suffer a lot in high school because they're just teaching towards those final exams. Like, nothing else matters. Just have to make sure you pass those exams, which obviously puts people off from really delving into the subject that they may like, that they took an interest in. And I think that's a great change in college, because students start to realize that the professor isn't exactly interested in you like only taking exams. They want to hear from you how you're taking the subject you decided to take, how you're taking the course, and they want to see your thoughts and ideas and what you're getting from it. Because, I mean, you're absolutely right. We're going to get some of those poets and poems where we look at it and we're like, oh, man, I don't get it. I don't see it that way. And the professor is like, well, it's okay that you don't see it that way, like, because that's what it's about. Like,
and sometimes it's intentional for it to be confusing. Like, that's the whole purpose.
Yeah, it's like Dr. Petty tells it's made to make us think.
Yeah.
Like, that's all it really is about. And I think it's great that the college itself, just the college experience overall, provides that for students, especially when students like go into school after high school thinking, man, it's just going to be high school all over again. I'm not going to like my English class. I'm not going to like my math class, stuff like that. And it's like, well, no, you're going to find that you're going to like it because the professors treat you now more like adults.
Yeah, and then with higher education, you know, the idea is the challenging of ideas, challenging your worldview. So you might think a certain way politically or socially or different things, and it's an opportunity to challenge that, but also defend your ideas and just be open-minded towards different viewpoints. So that's what I really liked, because we had a very diverse student group throughout my English undergraduate degree, and somewhat so in our graduate program as well. And I like that because everybody comes at it from a different angle. And sometimes, you know, I learn different things, and I change my viewpoint on certain things because somebody introduces a new perspective on things. And also, I just want to go back, you know, no disrespect to anybody who I had in high school as a teacher.
No, he means the disrespect. Take that disrespect.
No, not at all. Because I did have awesome high school English teachers, and that's how I learned about World War II, and we were looking at different literature in that regard, so that really turned me on to learning about history, world history, also American history as well. And we got to look at different things as well. We looked at Shakespeare, so it was an early introduction to that. So there were good moments in my high school career where I got to explore literature. It was just a lot of it there was a focus on standardized testing. So.
Yeah. No, but that's good that you at least were still able to find that positive and get all that out of high school, regardless if you had good or bad. I'm glad to hear that you had good high school experiences overall, though.
Yeah.
So now we're winding down to the closing of the podcast with these final two questions. So the first one, Anthony, what do you love about Sul Ross?
I feel like that would extend for another hour.
No,
and in all honesty, all jokes aside, what I love about Sul Ross is it welcomes a wide demographic of students. So regardless of your background, there's opportunity for you to grow. And for me, that's really what it was. Again, coming from an introverted background, very shy, very kind of felt like an outcast in a way in the beginning. I had so many faculty members and different people in our social group that saw potential in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself at the time. So I think it's an opportunity to grow personally, professionally. And I always say, you know, I owe a lot of my personal development to higher education. I'm glad that I came to a small school like Sul Ross because I was able to develop those professional relationships with faculty and staff and everybody else. So I think Sul Ross is a very special place in the sense that even though you can get a college degree in so many different places and there are hundreds of thousands of people that have the same degree as us, it's the unique experience you get from a small community like Sul Ross that makes it special. From the way people open the door for you whenever you're walking into a place to people waving at you on the road that you don't even know.
Oh, yeah.
It's that hospitality and that welcomeness, the eagerness to push you further. So I think that's something that's unique to Sul Ross, and that's why it's so special to me.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the big draws to me when I first heard about Sul Ross back in high school. They're like, oh, it's a small campus. The professors know you by name. It's like, oh, cool. I won't be just another number to them, or like I'll actually get to see the professor instead of, oh, here's my TA. I'll see you, I guess, at the end of the semester.
Yeah, and it felt really special because some of the professors, after knowing them for a little bit of time, they would ask me, "Hey, Anthony, how are you doing today?"
Yeah.
Little things like that make a big difference for students. When someone simply says, "Hey," and they acknowledge you, "Hey, how are you doing today? How's so-and-so doing?" You know, because you've built that relationship over time and you've built that trust. So it's a very special opportunity to have that here at Sul Ross, and a great privilege because I sound like I'm blowing smoke, but really, I've had a tremendous time here, and I'm very grateful for the people that I've met and the opportunities that have came from that. So not only my hard work, but also the potential that people saw in me, even though if I felt I wasn't ready for said opportunity.
So then, with this in mind, what do you love about Alpine?
It's interesting because I guess it's a perspective shift, because growing up in a small town, I know for me and many of the people that I've grew up with in my age group, we all used to think collectively, "Oh, it's so boring here. There's nothing to do. I can't wait to get out of here and go to the city." But as an adult now, I appreciate it more because it was a slower lifestyle. Everybody knew everybody in the community, so there's a sense of hospitality and accountability for each other. So it allowed me to explore myself creatively, personally, and just being outdoors here. Like, we have the beautiful Big Bend area here. We're like right at the corner of the Chihuahuan Desert here in Alpine. So I really appreciate Alpine more as I get older, because I like the slower lifestyle. Even though eventually I'll probably move out of Alpine and move to a bigger place, I'm still a small town boy at heart. So, Alpine and Marfa and the whole Tri-County area will forever be my home. But I just appreciate it now because it's a slower lifestyle of living. Mm-hmm. It's a way for someone to discover themselves and just really take their time and really find who they are, so to speak, not only through the environment, but from the people and the hospitality. Mm-hmm. So in a way, we're kind of sheltered with that because we have such a wonderful community here. But also, I think it does prepare somebody to tackle on once they get out of the community and explore other avenues. So yeah, Alpine's a very special place for me for all those reasons.
Yeah, and it's great because it also sounds like it allows people to, it's a slow lifestyle. It allows people to self-reflect as they're growing and developing and experiencing all the things a small town can offer, because then they get to reflect on what type of person they're going to be. Is this lifestyle for them? Do they prefer something bigger? And Alpine provides it in a nice, little compact way. So, yeah, I can see why you are very appreciative for places like Alpine and Marfa. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and even though, we're a small community, there's always stuff going on. There's always people doing fundraisers or community gathering events, music, arts, everything that, makes a community unique and special. We have that here, so it's not mutually exclusive to a larger place. There's still plenty of things you can do here, especially if you enjoy the outdoors or even the nightlife here in Alpine. So there's things for everybody and for all age groups. Mm-hmm. And that's something I appreciate too, is there's always something going on and different experiences to try out.
That's good. Well, Anthony, before we close this episode of the podcast, do you have any questions for me that you'd like to get off of your chest?
No questions, but I do want to say, I'm really proud of this podcast. I've been a longtime fan since the very first episode.
Oh, thanks, man.
I've watched a lot of them, so yeah, you've done a phenomenal job. I know Jocelyn was a big part of this too, so she did a great job. Bobby, of course, with everything going on with the editing and everything, it's been phenomenal, and I hope this sparks more inspiration for new projects in the future.
Hopefully, yeah.
And I'm glad that you guys are doing podcasts and we're getting more innovative and more advanced with everything. So that's great. And I just want to say too, I've seen your progression. Because we were talking about me, but the thing is a lot of our friend group and our cohorts and everything met through the library through different experiences. Yeah. And I've seen the transition in you as well, because from a student worker at the circulation desk to now full-time staffer, and then with all of your career goals and aspirations, just seeing how much you've grown, I'm proud of you as well, because it kind of naturally happens with everybody. And again, that's what makes the library a special place. Is it's not just for the student workers and staffers, but for everybody that goes through. I always try to make it, a positive experience for whoever I interacted with in the library. And of course, meeting you and some of our mutual friends, I think they would say the same thing.
Definitely. Well, Anthony, thank you very much for great words of inspiration there. Appreciate the praise there. And thank you for being here on the show with me. And thanks again for people who tune in and watch the show. Be sure to check out the next episode when it comes out. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.